The key to good skin is hidden deep in the ocean. Osea's Undaria algae body oil harnesses the powers of Undaria seaweed in every bottle to transform dry skin to silky, soft, and glowing without feeling greasy. Seaweed is a nutrient-dense superfood packed with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants that help replenish the skin's moisture barrier and maintain a healthy glow. Osea's Undaria algae body oil is not your typical body oil. Rich, yet never greasy, and clinically shown to instantly improve skin elasticity. See the power of Undaria seaweed after just one use. Get healthy, glowing skin with clean vegan skin and body care from Osea. For 10% off your first order, use code SEAWEED10 at OseaMalibu.com. Plus, free samples with every order and free shipping on orders over $50. Use code SEAWEED10 for 10% off at OSEAMalibu.com.
Ever missed out on concert tickets because of bots? World ID lets you easily and privately verify you're not a bot and access things only humans should, like events, dating apps, and video games. It is a digital identity that anonymously proves you're a unique human online, creating a priority lane for humans in the age of AI. Join millions of humans across more than 160 countries. If you're human and you know it, get your free World ID at world.org.
Hi there, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. And today I'm diving back into a book that I was reviewing earlier in the year, My Palestine by Mohammad Tarbush. Nada Tarbush, his daughter, has kind of edited the diaries and the memoirs of Mohammed, who was quite an extraordinary man, really. He left Palestine in his youth. This is after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, and travelled to Europe. He spent his formative years studying in Great Britain. He found a career in banking and later as a kind of a diplomat and an advocate for the Palestinian people. And it's a great book. It's a great book because it tells the story of the kind of the slow evisceration of Palestine from a Palestinian perspective. It's very easy for people who look from the outside to hear, the many outsider voices, the many non-Palestinian voices, which are indeed great historians and great intellectual and moral and political commentators on the subject. But we do have to really try to see things from the perspective of the people who are closely affected by the occupation and apartheid regime, Zionist regime. And it's a great book because it's full of these little hidden gems. And I'm going to read a couple today, which give us insights into the effect of Zionism on Palestine, and the fact that much of what we see now, the genocide we see now, is simply an exaggerated version, or a kind of an intensified version of the racial and discriminatory and sort of apartheid policies that have always existed. So it's about seeing those connections and those historical, the wider historical context to the current genocide in Gaza. And one of the things that the proponents of the genocide, the supporters of the genocide, the protectors of the genocide are most keen to do is to argue that there is no context, that October the 7th simply happened, there's no context to it, and now the mass murder of Palestinian people has no prior kind of history to it either. And of course, this is never true. So the first part of Mohammad Tarbush's the first bit that we're going to look at today is the development of global ideas around Palestinian solidarity in the 1970s. And he writes, growing awareness of the Palestinian narrative continued to gather momentum, culminating in November 1975 with the UN General Assembly adopting a resolution asserting that Zionism was a form of racism and racial discrimination. It was met with the same reactions as those to the Iraqi government advertising campaign. Iraq had obviously, under Saddam Hussein, had made similar assertions previously. It's interesting that in the current moment of, again, genocide in Palestine, where anti-Zionism is deliberately and woefully and mendaciously conflated with anti-Semitism, the UN 50 years ago, the General Assembly of the UN had already passed a resolution saying that this essentially apartheid regime was a form. This is the Zionist ideas that motivate it is a form of racial discrimination. This has been known for 50 years. This has been stated for 50 years, but it is as if this in current discourse as if this had never been articulated. It really is quite extraordinary. For me, as a Palestinian, writes Mohammad Tarbush, Zionism had evolved into a dogma that stifled free thought. It was glaringly obvious in words and deeds that Zionism viewed Palestinians, whether Christian or Muslim, as inferior. The distinguished Jewish professors Israel Shahak and Norton Mesvinsky wrote several books and articles quoted later in this book, amply documenting those attitudes which they deemed as racist. Were we ethnically cleansed from Palestine? We were ethnically cleansed from Palestine not only because we were the weaker party in the power game, but because we were perceived as non-entities whose aspirations for a dignified life were beneath consideration. These attitudes within Zionism were not so much theoretical notions, but rather lived realities, demonstrated inter alia by denying us Palestinians the right of return to our birthplaces. Abba Eban, the former Israeli foreign minister, published an article in the Times challenging the 1975 UN resolution about Zionism and racism. I responded to Eban in a letter published in the same paper by asking what I had asked him previously during an Oxford Union debate, namely to explain why he, a South African, had more rights than me, a Palestinian, to live and settle in Palestine. Abba Aban, who could talk the hind legs of a donkey, had recoiled and waffled back at my straightforward question. Neither his remarkable eloquence nor his immense intellect proved enough for him to articulate a coherent answer. Early into the spring of 1976, I was asked by Millennium, Journal of International Studies based at the London School of Economics, to review a book entitled Open the Gates by Ehud Avriel. Open the Gates was a detailed account of the intricate operations involved in smuggling Jews out of Europe, particularly those living under Nazi occupation, and relocating them to Palestine at a time when Britain had imposed limits on Jewish immigration to Palestine. As an agent of the Haganah, the author was himself a chief operator in organizing these missions. He relates numerous dramatic espionage ventures involving Greek shipping agents, diplomats, journalists, princes, and members of other secret agencies, among them the Gestapo. A reader unfamiliar with the history of Palestine under the British Mandate would be left with the impression that Palestine was a deserted country whose coasts were guarded by British sailors and soldiers unwilling to have anyone share that rough treasure with them. No mention was made of the reasons for Britain restricting Jewish immigration to Palestine, namely to avoid provoking hostility from Palestinian Arabs, already concerned about the takeover of their country, or of the fact that the indigenous Arab population was actually apprehensive and unwilling for Palestine to receive a flood of immigrants with the self-proclaimed intention of colonizing their country. The same omission is found in Avriel's account of the Evian-le-Bon conference that was convened in 1938 in response to President Roosevelt's appeal to discuss the emigration of political refugees from Austria and Germany. Except for the Netherlands and Denmark, all 33 countries attending the conference, including the United States, declined to lift their restrictions on Jewish immigration. Although there were no Palestinian representatives at the conference, the author concludes that the one country that felt it did not have enough Jews was Palestine. Most intriguing was the book's reference to the direct collaboration between Zionist figures and the Nazi authorities. At the peak of the Nazi persecution of the Jews, the Haganah gave full priority to Zionist political aims, and humanitarian considerations were given an inferior ranking. The following encounter between Avriel and Eichmann is particularly striking. Progress is too slow, Eichmann, barked at me. It was time to make the place at Judenrein, a Nazi term meaning cleansed of Jews, and soon. We do all we can, I said. Sometimes, however, his office delayed these urgently needed papers, and it was increasingly difficult to obtain ships. Mere excuses, Eichmann shouted. I was protecting a political interest. We moved so slowly because we insisted on young people only. I insisted that the only reason for our selectivity was the hardship of the trip. The passengers had to be able to jump into the sea near the shore to escape the British. So much has been made of this, and again, this got the former mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, into huge trouble with the Labour Party. Actually, resulted in his expulsion. The idea that Zionists and Nazis were at certain points, very briefly, coordinating their activities. I mean, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that this was indeed the case, though this did not last for particularly long. And it was really motivated by Eichmann's desire to find a way of removing Jews from Germany and Anschluss, Austria. And the way in which a lot of scholarship around the Holocaust, I mean, the majority of credible scholarship around the Holocaust now kind of gravitates is the idea that the Holocaust is kind of the product of the chaos of war. It is the product of endless radicalization of the regime, and it's the product of previous solutions, for want of a better word, by the Nazis to where to send the Jews and what to do with them, being either unworkable or impossible. Shipping large number of Jews to the Palestine Mandate is very, very difficult. The British in the 1930s and then during the war make this very, very difficult, and it's not a credible mass solution as far as someone like Eichmann goes. And the picture you get from people like Eichmann is that they were only sort of temporarily interested in this plan, and the idea of mass killing becomes far more attractive to them.
El rugido de los aficionados, el ritmo de las porras, la intensidad en la cancha. Esto es más que solo un partido de fútbol. Con DraftKings Sportsbook, esta es tu oportunidad de convertir cada jugada en una gran ganancia. Descarga la app de DraftKings Sportsbook y usa el código HEART. Ese es el código HEART para que los nuevos usuarios reciban $200 en bonus bets al instante cuando apuestes solo $5. En asociación con DraftKings, la corona es tuya. ¿Problemas con el juego? Llama al 1-800-GAMBLER. En Nueva York, llama al 877-8-HOPE-NY o envía un mensaje de texto con la palabra HOPE-NY al 467-369. En Connecticut, hay ayuda disponible para problemas con el juego. Llama al 888-789-7777 o visita ccpg.org. Juega responsablemente. En nombre de Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. Debe ser mayor de 21 años. La elegibilidad varía según la jurisdicción. No válido en Ontario. Pueden aplicarse cargos en Illinois. Las apuestas de bonos son de un solo uso. La apuesta no se incluye en las ganancias y caducan después de ser otorgadas. La oferta finaliza el 29 de septiembre 2025 a las 11:59 p.m. hora del este. Los términos en DraftKings.com/sportsbook/promos.
Ever missed out on concert tickets because of bots? World ID lets you easily and privately verify you're not a bot and access things only humans should, like events, dating apps, and video games. It is a digital identity that anonymously proves you're a unique human online, creating a priority lane for humans in the age of AI. Join millions of humans across more than 160 countries. If you're human and you know it, get your free World ID at world.org.
The Zionist agenda to colonize Palestine was the overriding priority. If the Zionists' predominant concern was rescuing the beleaguered Jews, then the refugees would have been better off in any other part of the world outside Germany. Well, The real reason for Mossad's selectivity was that they wanted young people fit enough to help achieve their conquest of Palestine. And there is some evidence to suggest that there's a lot of selectivity during and after the war when survivors made it to Palestine, where the idea of this kind of Zionist idea of the ideal sort of individual, and the kind of the Zionist idea of the new reconstructed Jewish sort of Übermensch, is quite prevalent in discourse. So the idea that the Palestine Mandate and then the State of Israel open the doors to all Jews is, well, it's very, very debatable, that one, indeed. Mohammad Tarbush writes, this conclusion was corroborated by the fact that, even amongst the refugees who were young and fit, the Zionist movement confined its help to those of them willing to emigrate to Palestine, and Palestine only. Palestine's domination was their foremost priority. This was notably expressed by David Ben-Gurion in 1938. He said, if I knew that it was possible to save all the Jewish children in Germany by transporting them to England, but only half of them by transporting them to Palestine, I would choose the second, because we face not only the reckoning of those children, but also the historical reckoning of the Jewish people. So the next part of the next extract that I've chosen from the book involves the Zionist movement in England and the British press, or the Zionist movement in Great Britain. And again, this is written in the kind of the this part refers to the late 1960s. Mohammad Tarbush writes, I had a good working relationship with the Times. I was privileged to meet one of their brilliant editors, Edward Mortimer, and found him to be a man of rare intellect and personal integrity. Mortimer told me an anecdote that summed up the Times' general editorial policy. Apparently, one evening the journalists in charge of writing an editorial had had too much to drink and dropped off at his desk. When they found him in the following morning, he was still asleep, and only one word was written on his otherwise blank sheet of paper. Nevertheless, the Times was aware that there were there were at least two sides to any argument, but often that fundamental principle was overlooked in the Israel-Palestine case. Quite a kind of, no doubt a kind of an apocryphal tale, but the idea that nevertheless is the one word that a Times journalist would have written before passing out is quite an amusing one. From the sort of in the kind of the history of British press, the British press is both siding of complex situations. The Times' sympathies with Zionism, writes Mohammad Tarbush, could be traced back to 1917 and the intense lobbying preceding the Balfour Declaration. At the time, most of the British Jewish elite stood firmly against Zionism, and in May of that year, the two heads of Anglo Jewry, Claude Montefiore and David Alexander, along with a number of their colleagues, wrote to the Times protesting the government's intention to espouse a pro-Zionist stance regarding Palestine. Henry Wickham Steed, foreign editor of the Times, friend of Theodore Herzl, and sympathiser with Zionism, coordinated the public and immediate rebuttals from Zionist supporters. The same was done with the Manchester Guardian, the current Guardian, whose editor C.P. Scott was also close to pro-Zionist Jews, including Chaim Weizmann, Nahum Sokolow, and Leopold Greenberg.
Ever missed out on concert tickets because of bots? World ID lets you easily and privately verify you're not a bot and access things only humans should, like events, dating apps, and video games. It is a digital identity that anonymously proves you're a unique human online, creating a priority lane for humans in the age of AI. Join millions of humans across more than 160 countries. If you're human and you know it, get your free World ID at world.org.
Ever since that time, the Times' legacy of supporting Zionism outweighed the sum total of its journalists' opinions. For example, on the 28th of October 1969, the paper's foreign editor E.C. Hodgkin wrote an article critical of Israeli repressive measures in the occupied territories. It spoke of torture, destruction of homes, disproportionate use of force, and capital punishment. It was met by a torrent of letters from readers supporting the article and others ferociously opposing it, accusing the Times of anti-Semitism. One of the supportive letters came from Saida Nusseibeh, relating her own experience with Israeli repression during a women's demonstration in Jerusalem in April 1969. On their way to deliver a letter to the Israeli military governor, first they were attacked by Israeli forces, kicking them with their boots and hitting them with anything they had to hand, then arresting them, telling them they were no better than prostitutes, and taking each of them separately to an underground cell and interrogating them for 3 hours in a shift system. To put out the fire, on the 1st of November 1969, the Times published a leader entitled "To be Fair to Both," and apologetically proclaiming the paper's support for Israel, while admitting that Hodgkin was right in showing that Israeli forces reacted with severe repression, penalising both the guilty and the innocent. That editorial backpedalled by adding that such practices were a common reaction by an occupying army and linking the repressive measures to guerrilla or terrorist attacks, completely ignoring violent suppression of peaceful demonstrations, such as that attended by Saida Nusserbeh. Following its nevertheless doctrine, it also criticised attacks on Jewish politicians, claiming that the Times was friendly to the Nazi government and referring it to its sinister and terrible anti-Semitism. The Times leader argued that was obviously hysterical. If a calmly argued report on the conditions of the Arab people in the occupied territories is equated with the anti-Semitism of the Nazis, then nobody, except an avowed Israeli propagandist, can be allowed to discuss the state of Israel at all. It does Israel harm by pretending that she's a special kind of state which either can do no wrong, or when she does wrong, must not be criticised because of the memory of the wrongs that have been done to the Jews by other nations. The wrongs of the Jews cry out to heaven, but they do not cry out so loud that the wrongs of the Arabs need not be heard. Which is a kind of a way of the Times defending itself and defending what little support it's willing to hand to the Palestinians. And as we see now, the moment that a Western press institution, like the Guardian newspaper, for example, veers from any kind of veers towards any kind of critical evaluation of the Israeli government's conduct in Gaza, the accusation of anti-Semitism is used. So I'll leave you there. But I really wanted to kind of share those little vignettes from Mohammad Tarbush's book, My Palestine, An Impossible Exile. And to show you that there is just this far greater, that everything we see now is part of one long historical continuum that dates to 1948 and prior to that, and that the struggles we see now are nothing new, just intensified. Anyway, thanks very much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next Explaining History podcast. All the best. Bye-bye.
Ever missed out on concert tickets because of bots? World ID lets you easily and privately verify you're not a bot and access things only humans should, like events, dating apps, and video games. It is a digital identity that anonymously proves you're a unique human online, creating a priority lane for humans in the age of AI. Join millions of humans across more than 160 countries. If you're human and you know it, get your free World ID at world.org.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
If you've ever dreamed of quitting your job to take your side hustle full-time, listen up. This is Nicaila Matthews-Okome, host of Side Hustle Pro, a podcast that helps you build and grow from passion project to profitable business. Every week, you'll hear from guests just like you who wanted to start a business on the side.
If you can't run a side hustle, you can't run a business.
They share real tips.
And so I started connecting with all these people on LinkedIn, and I saw Target Supplier Diversity was having office hours.
Real advice.
Procrastination is the easiest form of resistance.
And the actual strategies they use to turn their side hustle into their main hustle.
Getting back in touch with your tangible cash and sitting down and learning to give your money a job, like it changes something.
Check out Side Hustle Pro every week on your favorite podcast app and YouTube.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.